you
Bern
go to?
Also in Zurich, Bern, and Lausanne. Yeah, 3 places. Yeah.
Oh, so you were in Bern. Actually, we live in Bern, so yeah.
Okay, yes, yeah. I was giving a presentation on one of our programs called C Learning, Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning. It's a K through 12 curriculum in education of heart and mind, what His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls secular ethics.
Oh, and where did you teach that in Bern?
We are now live on Facebook, everyone.
Okay.
And it should be recording.
Okay. We'll talk later.
Okay.
Let me just double check Facebook again to make sure it's happening. Okay. Yes, we are there. Okay. Excellent. All right, I'm going to admit everyone from the waiting room now. Everyone is currently unmuted, so you can greet one another.
Hello, hello.
Oh.
Hello, everyone.
Let's look at the chat.
Hello, hello.
Anna, namaskar. Turn on my Facebook. I can also try to share.
बेटा रैकेट किधर है?
Helmut, willkommen. Noch einmal.
आज तूने अंधेरा करके मारे हैं?
Hey, I've got a call from Jerry. Well, he says that he put in a rule 2 or 3 months ago that non-board members can listen in, but they can't say anything. Well, that's so. I didn't know about that.
Are you, Robert, are you speaking about IASC? Because we all invite your participation. You'll be able to discuss.
Yeah, hold on for just a minute.
I'm gonna mute that.
I'm going to check share on my Facebook also, see who else would like to join us.
Oh, is he not telling sleep?
I'm happy everyone's chatting or greeting their friends. It's good to see this. this connection we're creating among ourselves.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to now mute everyone except the presenters and turn it over to Dr. Claudia Kohli-Reichenbach, who is our moderator for today.
Thank you, Pam. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the fourth and final session of our webinar in light of COVID-19 from the perspectives of different religious traditions. Our session today will be recorded and we are also live on Facebook. In the last sessions, we had many viewers on Facebook, so welcome to the greater audience. In the last 3 sessions, we discussed the question from a Muslim, Jewish, and Christian perspective. Today, our focus is on Buddhism. The webinar series is organized by the International Association for Spiritual Care, IASC. My name is Claudia Kohli-Reichenbach, and it's my honor to serve on the governing board of the IASC. If you are not yet familiar with our organization, please find more information on our website and on Facebook. Please consider becoming a member of the growing scholarly network of the IASC. Later on, we will have another series of webinars beginning in January, discussing the topic from different professional perspectives. So stay tuned. For today, I'm very excited. We have 3 excellent scholars. Professor Lobsang Tenzin Negi. He is the Executive Director of the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory University in Atlanta. He also serves as a professor of pedagogy in the Department of Religion. Professor Negi is a former Buddhist monk. He reached the highest academic degree granted in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Afterwards, he completed his PhD at Emory in 1999. His interdisciplinary dissertation centered on traditional Buddhist and contemporary Western approaches to emotions and their impact on wellness. Professor Negi has overseen the academic endeavors undertaken by Emory in collaboration with His Holiness the Dalai Lama since 1998, including the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative, an educational program for Tibetan monastics, including social, emotional, and ethical learning, and the contemplative education program designed to promote sustainable compassion. Our second speaker will be Professor Chikako Ozawa-de Silva. She is Associate Professor of Anthropology in the Department of Anthropology, also at Emory University. Her researches focus on cross-cultural understandings of mental well-being by bringing together Western and Asian, particularly Japanese and Tibetan perspectives on the mind-body, religion, medicine, therapy. In her work, Dr. Ozawa-de Silva stresses a critical awareness of cultural biases in medical anthropology and facilitates collaborative research projects on cross-cultural understandings of mental health and well-being. Dr. Ozawa-de Silva also researches suicide and mental health in Japan. Our third speaker will be Dr. Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi. The scholarly work of Reverend Trinley has forged the philosophical and empirical foundations of contemporary international Buddhist practical theology and spiritual care. It is based on her research, contemplative practice, and service within Buddhist communities in Asia and the West for over 30 years. We met in 2017 in Switzerland, where Bhikshuni worked for several months at the Department of Pastoral Care at the University of Bern. Dr. Trinley presently serves as visiting lecturer in Asian religions at the School of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of Tartu in Estonia. Before we start with the speakers, please let me say just a few words about our schedule for today's webinar. The three lectures will follow one another without interruption. Afterwards, we will go into breakout rooms for discussion in small groups. After 15 minutes, the groups will end automatically, and we will return to the plenary for questions and discussion. And everybody, of course, is invited. What is spiritual care in light of COVID-19 from the Buddhist perspective? I may invite our first speaker, Professor Negi.
Thank you, Dr. Kohli, and thank you to the International Association of Spiritual Care for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this great panel and to be with my colleague at Emory, Dr. Ozawa-de Silva, and Bhikshuni Lobsang Tenzin Negi, Dr. Tenzin Negi. It's really a pleasure, and good morning or good afternoon, evening to everyone participating from the various parts of the world. Yes, I am, as Dr. Kohli mentioned, I am a Buddhist scholar. I was a monk for many years, about 27 years actually. Went through the monastic training and came to Atlanta in 1991, and that's where my introduction in a kind of more formal sense to the Western culture and philosophical and scientific traditions, that's when it began. So the topic for us today is spiritual care in light of COVID-19, and this panel is on drawing from the Buddhist perspectives. I would like to just present briefly a few of the insights or the resources that Buddhist tradition can provide and does provide for individuals like us to deal with a crisis like the one that we are going through. Number one, I think when crisis like this happens, it's very natural for us as individuals to feel very unsafe. You know, that is when our lives are threatened, when we don't know whether we will get infected with this deadly virus, whether our loved ones will get infected, you know, and what would happen to us in such a situation. The kind of this instinctive reaction, or this, you know, like that, there is a fear to it. It's natural. I mean, it is natural. It's not something that you know, we cannot really not have in this situation. But from the spiritual perspective, you know, we should see what we can do, as the psychology also provides some tools here. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a practice called refuge, you know, going for refuge. Why do we go for refuge? We go for refuge when we are in, you know, in some kind of threat, right? You know, like that. If we are ill, you know, some kind of illness, we don't know what is causing and so forth, what the treatment and so forth, we go take refuge in the medicine and the doctors and the nurses. in the Buddhist tradition, we have something called the going refuge to the three precious and sublime jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, like that. And like all the religious traditions, Buddhism as a religion certainly, has the quite extensive practices to, attuning to or calling on or this, turning to such sources of refuge or the protection, those three precious and sublime jewels. This kind of practice, where a practitioner, when you attune to, you bring your attention to such, sources of protection, and to the degree that you can really attune to, you can connect, emotionally and mentally, bring like a sense of that connection and felt sense can be very helpful. And modern, psychology, that also presents the evidence of that, how when we connect to some source of, safety and security, it is very, very healthy for us. It helps us deal with those kind of unpredictable or the uncertain situations. Number one, connecting to that source of resilience, of well-being, that is a felt sense of comfort and safety. And fortunately, all religious traditions have, extensive practices. Buddhist tradition certainly has very extensive practices where you visualize the presence of the Buddha or your spiritual teachers, that recalling of the Dharma, the qualities like love, compassion, and so forth that they represent, they embody, that how, they are embodying such, and with that such unconditional compassion and wisdom, that if we open our hearts and minds, that we can receive the blessings and the protection, whether, actually how it happens, that whether from the Buddhas that comes or not, it may be somewhat of a metaphysical question, but psychologically speaking, that you can see the impact of when one feels, the connection to some source where we find safety. It obviously leads to a sense of, security and safety, and that is what is so crucial, because when that is missing, we would be very much, emotionally and sort of feeling unsafe and distress, and that can further, make us prone to other problems. Now, number two, that in situations like this, as I mentioned, it's only natural for us to respond or react, feel fear and this uncertainties and like that. So how do we deal with that? What does the Buddhist tradition provide? And here, like in the medicine, we talk about, that how, or today, our medical professionals can advise us that we need to maintain hygiene, like the hand hygiene, that they're making sure that we maintain, we are mindful of what we are touching and so forth. If we, touch certain things that where there might be virus, that we make sure that we wash our hands and so forth, like that. Similarly, I think that the Buddhist tradition has a very rich psychological kind of, tradition. Science of mind is the kind of the focus in Buddhist tradition for millennia. It also presents the ways to promote emotional hygiene. What do we mean by emotional hygiene? That it's about recognizing, that when we do feel certain tensions, certain fears, certain, distresses, it is natural that we will feel that. But, as in the hygiene, that if we, come in contact with some virus, what we need to do, we need to wash our hands, like or use the hand sanitizers and like that. In this case, what do we mean by emotional hygiene? As first thing is to become aware. If we're not aware that we touch some place where there could be virus, that we would not go about washing our hand. But so awareness is one part. Awareness of what's happening inside, what's happening, what we are feeling, and so forth. But then if kind of the very simple steps for emotional hygiene has to do with, well, when one recognizes, first number one step, either to disengage from that feeling or emotion that one feeling, instead of just sitting with that and then make this little impulse or the little spark become just big forest fire of emotion, but rather, learning to kind of have that choice to redirect our attention to something like this, something that is comforting, something that feels safe, or just something that, like on one's own breath, that you may have heard about mindfulness of breathing, bringing attention to the gentle or the natural rhythms of our own breath and just kind of sitting there and that keeping our attention, resting at our attention with that in breath and out breath. By disengaging from what is distressing us, what kind of emotion what kind of feelings that we're feeling, can be step number one. The other part, like that, how do with this pandemic, COVID-19, we're talking about, how we need to make sure that we maintain social distance, wear our masks, protective masks, and so forth. Similarly, that in the practice in the Buddhist tradition, unfortunately, we are, this disease is something that kind of requires us to go against millions of years of evolution. That is that we are social beings. We seek connection. That we kind of really wither without the association of others, and that sense of and I know that my colleague is going to present about the loneliness, so I won't go into that. But we are social beings, that when we have to stay away from others, and it naturally is going to lead to many of the social, also emotional problems. It will exaggerate. So spiritual practices, like compassion, that in the Buddhist tradition, is about building that connection. That we can, using our own, the conscious state of mind, to deliberately, we can attune to our common humanity, that what are common to us, we can attune to, human condition of ourselves and others. That if we can do that, like us, other people around us are also scared, afraid, that they are also having the same, worries and fears about and struggling with the same. They want to be safe, and in such ways that if we can connect to that, we can, buffer, or that we can, in some ways, this sense of kind of loneliness, and with that other emotional distresses that come, we can minimize that, mitigate that. But also another major part in this is, interdependence. That to really highlight it. Not only we are, similar in the sense we share the same basic aspirations, goals, and dreams, and so forth, needs, and so forth. But also we are interdependent. Look around, like that, how, countless people that going out of their way, they're at the risk of their own health and the safety and their loved ones out there, it's to keep us safe, keep the communities, safe and protected. We can attune to, that from the Buddhist perspective, that cultivating gratitude and compassion has to do with by making visible those countless ways that we are receiving benefit from the people around us and the many people that who we may not know. But when we connect to their lives in terms of what difference they are making in our lives, that we will naturally have this sense of gratitude, which is characterized by a sense of warmth and tenderness. That emotionally will be very comforting, very helpful. And then the final thing, just I would say, as my time is coming to end here, one of the things that we can, from the Buddhist tradition, we can learn has to do with, in terms of what we may call discernment or the wisdom, the understanding, to see, to take the situation like pandemic, to see it from a broader perspective, to understand, that what can make this worse and where we can make a difference. What difference can we make? And that's where I think that, wearing mask, that making sure that we don't go inside where a lot of people and without masks and so forth, keeping social distance. What we can do has to do with our own agency. Instead of kind of focusing on what I cannot do, but rather seeing what I can do, and seeing that even wearing masks when it is necessary, it is a contribution towards the greater good, for slowing down the spread of the virus, the giving scientists and doctors the chance, the time to develop, treatments and the vaccines and so forth. If we can, can engage in from that perspective, what we can do, even small steps, making sure to make wearing masks, washing hands and so forth, these are all towards something greater, a meaningful contribution. Then we will not feel so helpless, that we will have a greater sense of meaning and purpose in life. All of these contribute to our psychological well-being and the quality of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Negi, for this talk. I may invite our next speaker, Professor Chikako Ozawa-de Silva.
Thank you. Let me first share the screen. So I hope you're able to see the screen right now. Okay. So, well, thank you, Geshe Lobsang, for your wonderful talk. And I feel we have quite a lot in common. So hopefully there is a very good connection from that earlier talk. And thank you, Dr. Claudia Kohli, for inviting me for today's talk. So the title of the talk today is COVID-19 and Loneliness. Naikan, a Japanese Buddhist-derived contemplative practice as a way to cope with loneliness. So first, actually, about myself, my name is Chikako Ozawa-de Silva, and I'm an Associate Professor of Cultural, Psychological, and Medical Anthropology at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm a colleague of Dr. Geshe Lobsang Negi at Emory. And I teach and research cross-cultural understanding of mental well-being and mental illness. So I studied and taught Naikan, a topic I'm going to talk about today, as well as suicide among young Japanese and loneliness. A new book titled The Anatomy of Loneliness is coming next year from University of California. So the theme, what is spiritual care in light of COVID-19, made me think about what kind of challenges we have been experiencing during COVID-19 since mid-March. So clearly, loneliness has been one of the most highly expressed challenges for many people. Most popular social media discussion forum, Reddit, has threads on loneliness, such as titled COVID-19 and Loneliness. Loneliness, most common stressor during COVID-19. So as you're seeing, this is a 2016 New York Times article. So even prior to the COVID-19, loneliness has been increasingly recognized not merely a personal issue, but rather a social and public health issue. UK appointed the Minister of Loneliness in 2018 as an example. Loneliness is more harmful than smoking, obesity, with regards to its negative impact on both physical and mental health. And now loneliness has been even more serious issue during this COVID-19 time. So next slide shows the most recent article from the New York Times, why we reach for nostalgia in times of crisis. So the author of this article says, ever since the coronavirus lockdown began, I've been longing for my past. And she mentions how she has tried to reach out and reconnect with her old friends from high school times. So loneliness and nostalgia have an intimate connection. Remembering the past, that brings us a sense of being connected with others and feeling safe. These are antidote to loneliness. So here there is this Japanese contemplative practice called Naikan that focuses on remembering one's past in a very specific way to restore the sense of connection. So let me describe what this practice is. So Nai literally means inside, Kan means looking. So Naikan literally means inside looking or introspection. The aim is to gain insights for oneself and others. So the image you're seeing is the typical Naikan space. So clients spend 1 week to recollect, re-examine their past in a relational context. So Naikan was adopted by Yoshimoto Isshin in 1941 from Mishirabe, a practice of true Pure Land Japanese Mahayana Buddhism, and secularized this practice into the current form of Naikan. So Naikan remembers or revisit our past, but always in a relational context. And therefore it is known for restoring our sense of social connections. Naikan also focuses on remembering kindness we receive from other people. So this increased sense of gratitude that is key to happiness and positive mental being is often attained from this Naikan practice. Naikan is a kind of mindfulness practice, being mindful of kindness from other people. So talking about mindfulness in a historical context, sati, smrti, drempa, these all mean holding an object in mind, recollection, or retention according to the traditional Buddhist sources. Mindfulness usually needs to take an object to be mindful of, such as mindfulness of right action, mindfulness of kindness. So Naikan is a recollection of kindness of others, can be seen as a mindfulness practice that accords with traditional accounts. So in 15 minutes short talk, I cannot explain what this practice is in an extensive way, but one distinctive method about Naikan is in terms of how we remember our past. We are asked to follow these 3 questions. Question 1, what have I received from this person? Second, what have I given back to this person? Third, what troubles and difficulties have I caused this person? So I often say the first 2 make sense. It's like receiving and returning. It's reciprocal. You know, what did you receive? What have you done in return? The third question, what kind of troubles we cause other people? That is actually key to Naikan. And the number 4 question, trouble other people cause us, is intentionally not included in Nikon because Nikon experts say, well, you don't need to spend 7 days remembering your past because we are experts in remembering troubles which other people caused us. Actually, neuroscience also has been empirically explained that's the case. From the evolutionary process, we have actually negative biases. So now you're seeing a mandala image that was made by one of the Nikon clients right after his Nikon practice. So this is a picture of a relational self and interdependence. So it shows a sense of being loved, accepted, and helped by other people. So a person in the center is a Nikon client himself, and the surrounding are grandparents, parents, siblings, and then the yellow dots are friends. And it goes to people that he doesn't even know, and realizing in the entire life, that person has been receiving infinite amount of support, even from strangers. So here, just to show one maybe example, narratives from somebody who has done Nikon. So a group of us from Emory University had been teaching classes at Georgia's maximum security prison at the Arendelle in the last several years. In one of the classes, I taught Nikon, and a woman I call Kate initially reacted quite negatively towards Nikon. She didn't tell me at the time, but later she told me she really felt it's really not for her. There is nothing bright and joyful about her traumatic life. Nikon is a big BS. And she said, quote, I didn't think or believe anything about my self-history could be rearranged. I decided, however, that I've got nothing to lose by doing the Nikon practice. So she actually committed spending 100 hours of doing Nikon and eventually extended that to 200 hours. So this is what Katie said right after her Nikon. From the ages of 7 to 19, I was sexually and physically abused by the dog man with my mother's consent. At 19, it finally ended. I took my mother's life and lost mine to the system. The story of my mother's struggle, heartache, and loneliness is indeed a very sad one, especially since I'm just now looking at it from her perspective. All of these things opened my heart, my eyes, and my memory, giving me a chance to reflect not only on the horrific things that happened to me, but also on the fact that I was well fed and clothed, and that my mom had issues that she obviously felt were bigger than she was. Forgiveness for my mom is coming with me being able to feel compassion for her and for how she must have felt and why. I decided that unforgiveness was like slowly committing suicide, and I'm not ready to die. My continued healing process comes from forgiveness, which the Nikon practice has been a roadmap in helping me get there. So basically for her, she has been in prison at the time when I met her for 20 years. So she went through the phase of hating her mother, strong grudge toward her, but she realized it is her who has been suffering from this intense sense of loneliness, sense of disconnectedness, sense of being abandoned from her own mother. And she knew hating her mother was not going to restore this kind of mental ache. And from her practice of Nikon, she remembered that her mother has fed her, loved her, took her to amusement parks, all actually positive memories that she has forgotten, suppressed. And with loving memory, she feels now she feels actually connected with her mother, and therefore she felt now she is not trapped in the past, but finally be able to live in the present moment. So in a conclusion, Naikan in a way is a very simple practice because it's all about asking clients to remember their past in line of these three questions. So that is aimed to gain insights into oneself, others around us, and therefore realizing our own cognitive biases towards others and ourselves. So that's why the founder of Naikan, Yoshimoto, used to say, Naikan is a way to happiness. I also say Naikan's double focuses on remembering one's past in relational context and focusing on remembering kindness one received from others really means gaining insight into interdependence, a topic Geshe Lobsang was also emphasizing. When we can gain insight into the interdependence, instead of the feeling of I am my self-made person, I'm independent, I'm not relying on anybody. What happened is the naturally increased sense of social connections and gaining a strong sense of being loved and accepted increased the sense of gratitude. Therefore, it increased sense of social connections. So perceived sense of social connection is the opposite of loneliness because loneliness has been understood as a perceived sense of social isolation, not actually the physical isolation. So meaning even during this COVID lockdown, even though we cannot meet people, if we can increase this perceived sense of connection, that's the best antidote for loneliness. So in terms of that, a few practical tips I think that Naikan can provide for us, because it's not that we have like 1 week to do Naikan, we don't have that kind of schedule, but perhaps focusing on the ways we are supported, such as what are we receiving from others? What are we giving back to others? That kind of perspectives might be very helpful to increase a sense of interdependence, connectedness, and therefore gratitude. Thank you so much. So now I will stop my shared screen.
Thank you so very much for your talk. We turn now to our final speaker, Dr. Bhikshuni Trengli.
And namaste, everyone. Sorry to blast you like that, but I have to come up, and it's so nice to be able to join you all today. And I also wanted to say, especially also Tashi Dele de Geshe-la over there and your Emory people, because, you know, I got started in physics, actually. I was studying high energy particle physics in Boston. And I actually had my first Geshe teacher was late Geshe Lobsang Tenzin was Lharampa Geshe from Uganda and Jiangxi, who had come to teach us in Boston. And at the time, actually, the Professor Sarah McClintock and former Professor John Dunn, who really formed so much of the Emory program, they were finishing their PhD at Harvard at that time. And I also was a former, you know, some attendant with another person to Geshe Lobsang Tenzin, and he actually had gotten a cancer, you know, and he died there in Boston, and I was one of his students. It was quite a painful situation, but he really inspired me because he showed how, having had, you know, 40 years of daily practice and study, at the time at the end of life came, even he was completely removed from his home country, his mother tongue, all the monks in India and Tibet and his family members, his foods, his favorite things, you know, just all for the sake of teaching us in the United States. I saw how those practices and blessings of His Holiness Dalai Lama and all the others, you know, kept him in a state of real peace and composure through that whole process of letting go. And so for me, I had dedicated, you know, the best way to repay his kindness would be to surf. And so I went down to Sera Monastery in South India and was teaching science. So when Geshe La was coming to the United States, I actually had gone to India on Sera Ganden La Lubra. I was helping Labdra Gegen with the young monks and in Lhasa, and then did some retreat training. So almost 20 years in South Asia, including hermitage training in Solukhumbu in Nepal. So thanks to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all my teachers for that. So here in my presentation, I'm going to share more from a bigger picture point of view. And so for that, I would like to share my screen and let you join my presentation that I've prepared. And I have a couple of pieces to it. And so I'm talking about what just Claudia, thank you so much for organizing an International Association of Spiritual Care to allow us to think about this. But this is really a historical moment for Buddhism in the history of Buddhism. And I hope to highlight some of the aspects and then come back to some of the points which the others have mentioned also. So I didn't have a lot of time to take data from different people for this presentation, but in the short time we have managed to get something to share. So the main point I wanted to make was, you know, before we start getting into the details, is that this time of the virus in the Buddhist schedule has coincided with the Tibetan New Year and the Vesak and the Sakadawa time. So this is a time of very amplified Buddhist study and practice, typically in Buddhist culture. So it's kind of a confound that, you know, if we ask people, are you practicing more meditation or prayers or whatever, then they're already doing more of that anyway because of this time of year. But that's okay, just bear that in mind, you know, that's the case. So I was looking into what I'm interested to know in terms of experiences overall, self with respect to others, Buddhist spiritual care factors, which follows on research, which I have done before in Buddhist contemplative community in Darjeeling with the Drupa community of monks at Sangat Choling, Gompa. And so then also looking at the engagement and connection and care and compassion. So these were the main things I'm trying to find out and help share today. And I just wanted to point out like this terminology too, spiritual care. This is really coming through the Western, historically Christian theological traditions, but I do have some work that I have done to really establish what we could mean with this terminology in terms of Buddhism. And so based on literature from Buddhism and Western sources, I had just said that the phrase for spiritual care, for me as a scholar of spiritual care in Buddhism, it really means psycho-spiritually transformative and indicates a means or vehicle, a praxis, a visionary or normative spiritual care, similar to the Greek phronesis and Tibetan tapshe, which empowers positive psychospiritual growth and cultivation and can also be palliative to traumatic experience such as bereavement or illness and so on. So when we hear words like spiritual care, we may ask, well, what do we really mean in Buddhist context? So that is grounded, that work was field work and interviews with Buddhist communities in Asia have informed that definition, and you can see that text. Actually, I have a copy here, you can see. So actually, a lot of it is published on Google Books. You can see it without even ordering it or anything. So then the areas I was interested to check in with about what is my expectation to have more intensified experience. So that was the impact that I would have expected in terms of the doctrines, like the former professors were mentioning, in terms of impermanence and interdependence, Four Noble Truths, suffering and liberation. In fact, one of my teachers, Geshe Rinpoche, Kyabje Lamazopa Rinpoche, said, you know, like, we are dying all the time. You know, there are many causes of death. COVID-19 is only one of them. In other words, the causes for death are always there, and the causes for life are always at risk, but we're not really attending to those as much until now we have the pandemic. Then we have attention on that, you know. But for Buddhists, this is a regular part of the curriculum of study. And so then I expected more meditation and prayer, engagement with teachings and teachers, and more altruistic care, both for others and hopefully from others. So the next area that, you know, how I'm going to find this information was just through some general observations and then a small survey I made. And this is looking at some Buddhist groups through the internet and my own participation in online teaching programs and initiation programs, as well as a feedback survey. And so that is my first survey is here. The first thing I want to share with was the online teachings that had gone on in the Buddhist community as a response to the COVID-19. And the first one you can see here is that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, even though I actually in particular chose the Russian YouTube channel to share, that His Holiness had given, and I think it's the first time in history of the world, Avalokiteshvara sacramental empowerment over the internet in a live webcast. And if you look there, you can see 16,000 people joined in, and that's not, that was in the live broadcast in May. And so that was really like the first time I'd ever heard of actual video broadcast for a Wang or initiation in the Buddhist Vajrayana tradition, which is to have a sacramental permission to practice a certain meditation. In this case, was a form of compassion Buddha, Avalokiteshvara. So this is a quite historical event in the history of Buddhism, and it also opened the door for others to do similar types of programs. So Garchen Rinpoche, as an example, there are so many others, but these were going on, you know, while the Western countries are fighting and arguing with all of the different people about the, you know, like Russia gates and the politics and all of who's got their money and all their investments, and they're arguing over the material wealth and everything, and how it's distributed and ending wars. In the meantime, the Buddhists across the world, from Russian, English speaking, South America, India, Nepal, they're all joined together. We're not separated. And so we should bear this in mind when we feel like political frustration. And this was similarly the case in the Garchen Institute. So Garchen Rinpoche had a number of programs that had live webcasts and oral transmissions. One of my teachers I mentioned already, Khepje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they had a whole webpage organized about the COVID and how to do different practices. And then they organized a whole video series of live webcasts that Lama Zopa Rinpoche did from his own room in his monastery in Kathmandu in Nepal. And then aside from this kind of traditional type of teaching programs, also a lot of Buddhist organizations were active in actual social service. And so the Live to Love organization, inspired and founded by His Holiness Gyalwang Drukpa, that is actually an international organization. And so they were doing all kinds of relief, especially food distribution and mass distribution in India and Nepal. And they're active in so many countries you can find. And then similarly in Solukhumbu, where my hermitage is, the Namche Youth Group, actually in the Namche Youth Group, most of the people in the group are actually older guys and the middle-aged guys, but out of respect for elders, they're considered youth. But anyway, they're lodge and hotel owners. So they have lost thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in the tourism trade. But what they didn't really worry about it, they just went back to their traditional habits, which was similar when there was the earthquake a few years before, and go and do restoration projects. So I don't want to interfere with my internet connection to zoom in here, but actually here he's painting this mural on a stone wall, which is a public rock face that people trekking in Solukhumbu will see these images on the rock face. And then here they're carving and repainting the Omani Pemhung. You have to look here, there's these guys on the ladder. So they went to work doing the restoration projects basically, and then also distributing masks and all that. So that is the first piece, which is the general observations. And then the next part, I wanted to just actually go out of my Zoom presentation to show you from here. And I had given a feedback survey, and it's a little slow to load up, but from Estonia, the internet is not bad, actually. They call Estonia for electronic type of engagement. And can you see, Claudia, the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a little slow to load. I didn't, it's a little low, but okay, so it's coming in, and actually there were not so many responses yet because I only was able to share it recently. But usually in like structural equation modeling for social science research, more than 21 responses is enough to do statistical surveys. So that is basically research. And so I can show you the actual results, which the software prepares. It's got to send it back and forth through the Zoom connection. So it's a little slower to load, but here we go. So basically in my research in in Darjeeling, that was regarding contemplative Vajrayana puja practice, so a contemplative liturgy practice. So I did research and got some idea of what it meant, what we could say is the meaning in a Buddhist context for spiritual care. So here for this little survey, I have got quite a few responses, mostly in Estonian region, some from India, in Nepal, Taiwan, Europe, some in USA also. So it's a pretty wide distribution. And so here we can actually see some of the results. I'm sorry, it takes a little long to load. If I shut this one, maybe it will faster. Sorry to be patient. That is, you know, the perfection of patience is one of the 6 perfections in Buddhism. So this is one thing we have to practice. And so here you can see some of the results. And so the first question I asked was series, and I firstly asked a general opening question, but I'll go through it here just piece by piece. I'll let you look over the general information here. You could see mostly Tibetan respondents, mostly from Europe and Western Europe, Russia area. So I had asked about spiritual care factors, which I had discovered in the previous field research. And basically people had said that their experience of flow experience from moment to moment was not changed much, but there's some close, you know, 47% said, yeah, a little bit increased. So like I said, some of this could be due to the Sakadawa also, sense of being interdependent person, self. Some were increased, some had decreased, but also many the same. So pretty split up there. Experience of moments of transcendence were still not changed much, and a little bit of increase. Offline engagement with Buddhist teachings, not changed too much. Offline engagement with Buddhist practices were not changed too much. Care of self, not to change too much, but again, this is kind of increased also, 42% said. And then care received from others, that's pretty well split up here. Decreased and not changed too much, and increased. So kind of a diverse section. And then I just have to move, I have to move this picture, sorry. So here also, going back up the other side, just so I can see on the screen, compassionate care of others, very much increased, but I mean, the majority said increased, and connection with fellow Buddhists about evenly split up, not changed too much, but some said decreased. So this, I think, is connecting to the other doctor, Chikako, you know, in the loneliness. There's a sense of connection with fellow Buddhists decreased there. Online engagement with the practices not changed too much, which is interesting because we've seen a lot of increase in services online. And so that might translate to, you know, like into financial difficulties for people investing and offering those. Online engagement with Buddhist teaching, that was increased, so more than the practices. So a lot of prayer services have been done over the internet too. So that's why I was asking about teachings versus practice. Emotional well-being basically said not changed too much. but you know, fair number decreased. But these are low numbers of participants. And there are some follow-up questions I asked, and so we here can see some of the responses. Other ways you feel that your experience with Buddhism has been influenced by COVID-19. And so somebody said it's been influenced by the shift to online retreats. Many less computer-oriented teachers had to go online to see their students. And so it was interesting to see that. There's somebody concerned about white privilege. Being aware from Western Dharma centers has been a blessing due to the unresolved issues with white privilege and running an organization instead of fostering a Sangha community of inclusion, care, and respect. I've found more solace in the teachings, books as my Dharma instruction than I have in Sangha. I greatly miss Sangha, but do not miss racism that exists within Western organization format in its current state. So these are really interesting. Impermanence and resilience are much more necessary. Caring for others who need protection has increased feelings of compassion. I feel temporarily depressed about friends who have died during this time and have realized my attachment to helping their transition in person. The worldly dharmas I've chased have been able to be deeply analyzed during the lockdown and has caused a reassessment of the rat race for acquisition and what truly brings ultimate happiness and enlightenment. Generally, this situation, as well as all situations are good for Dharma practice, and COVID for me personally has increased awareness that life is precious, easily can be lost, and it's good to take advantage and practice. And then someone was commenting here about the media lies and all the propaganda and conflicts about a lot of, there's just not the clinical data yet. And people running, especially politicians who don't have much background in science or statistics, saying all kinds of statements that don't have statistical basis yet. I was surprised how many fellow Buddhists didn't look into the depths of the pandemic and believe all the nonsense they heard on media. A heightened sense of impermanence, interdependent origination, and the karmic web we lived in. Okay, there's one more page of these results, and I don't have control over the way these are displayed here, but I think there's a couple more on the next page. But
Juni, we have another 2 minutes.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
This is pretty much the end of it. There's not much left. Let's just see if it loads here. Yeah, it's okay. So I can go back into the trustful belonging and refuge increase, sources of inspiration feel increased, meaning and purpose increased. So so there, I just want to move this out of the way. So that's basically that's basically the result. And so that was, I just wanted to share those points that people have had. I think my expectation that things would be kind of amplified in intensity for people has been mostly true according to the majority of reports. And also there's been a lot of historical changes in Buddhism as a whole from this crisis. So thank you so much. And you know, we all have impermanence and we have to be prepared so to make life meaningful by cherishing others and caring for one another. And even one point which the professor mentioned also about feeling interdependent. We know from Vanikanamo, in the Vanikanamo neuron that runs between the gut and the brain, we have millions of kinds of sentient beings even in our body. So we are not alone. We are actually, that is a fallacy. Actually, we are interdependent, even in our bodies, we are interdependent, we know. So anyway, thank you so much, Claudia, and the other professors for letting me join your presentation today.
Thank you very much, Bhikshuni.
So now we're going to move into breakout groups, and I'm going to suggest that you all take a moment to look away from the screen, give your eyes a break, look at the farthest point you can to break your vision a little bit from the screen. And we're going to ask you to go into breakout rooms for about 15 minutes to talk about questions or comments that you'd like to bring back to the whole group in about 15 minutes. Claudia, anything you want to add?
Maybe just make sure that you choose a recorder who keeps track and brings the points to the plenary afterwards. And you can also use the chat.
And I'll just remind our speakers to not go into rooms.
So we don't have to do anything else, right? We can just stay
you just
in the room.
You need to leave the room when you get assigned to it. All right, so here we go. The rooms are going now. And Bhikshuni, can you stop screen sharing, please? Okay.
Hello? Hello?
So I guess I'm the only one back on the main.
You may need to, whoever said that, you may need to accept the move to the room. There's a button that you accept.
I didn't, I left.
Okay. If you are still here and you're not a speaker, you should be confirming your move to a breakout room at this point. There's a few of you who are still not in your breakout rooms. Okay.
We are still live on Facebook. That's okay, right?
Yep, we are.
It looks like Dr. Tinley must have left the Zoom.
She may still be in a small group.
We are still live on Facebook. That's okay, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we are.
It looks like Dr. Tinley must have left the Zoom.
There she is.
Here she is.
The joys of Zoom.
I'm still trying to get people into the small groups who didn't end up assigned. I'm not sure why. Oh, we lost Bhikshuni again. I don't know what happened. There she is. So of those of us who are in the main room waiting for the small groups, I actually had a question, Chikako.
Mm-hmm.
How do you compare the practice that you were describing to metta loving kindness meditation? It sounds like there's some similarities with remembering the benefactors and but maybe a big difference is thinking through someone with whom you've had struggles and then blessing them. But I'm just wondering if there's anybody has done any comparisons.
Not that I'm aware of, but I think as you pointed out, I think the case of Naikan is it's easy to remember loving kindness from people that you already have positive feeling in a relationship. But I would say even with those people like your parents, if you have good relationship with them, are actually level of recognizing the amount of love from Naikan perspective is very limited because of our biases. With Casey's parents, because you are my mother, mothers are all to do this. So many people experience at the beginning, the fact maybe your mother has fed you all through the year so that you're healthy and alive wouldn't be something that they consider as the loving kindness they receive from their own mother. It does take Naikan. So in that way, Naikan has a very highly cognitive side to it. It is actually addressing our own cognitive biases, especially negative ones. And so I said it's remembering, but remembering and re-examining one's past. Because at the beginning, many people say, I received 3 things from this person. But toward 5 days into Naikan, it's oh no, there are 30 things that person has done. So it's due to the cognitive shifts. So I think for that reason, even somebody who harmed you so badly, you start remembering, well, that person is also a human being. And therefore, even that person has done something nice in a long-term relationship the person been having. So it's kind of, check-in balance so that no one is 100% evil. And you are also not 100% victim. So you have also harmed others. Even somebody who harmed also have done something nice. So I don't know whether that helps.
I wondered also when Kate, the person in prison, mentioned forgiveness, how all of you thought about, that to me, that sounds like a very Christian category. And I'm wondering how forgiveness, especially as an activity, resonates at all with Buddhism, or if that's really more of a Christian overlay.
Dr. Tinley, sounds like you have some reaction.
I would say that, I didn't actually research forgiveness in my field research in Buddhist communities, but I know that it is definitely, we have some, actually Geshe can say even more, you know, like there's so, especially Tibetan tradition, there's no shortage of personal Buddhist instructions about exchanging oneself and one's happiness with others suffering, including our enemies. And this has come out even practically. Dzongtse Khyentse Rinpoche has a video clip telling the Buddhist students, you know, even if you don't like any kind of politician, you took the vow for the Bodhisattva vow. This is a commitment you have taken, even if they have horns on their head. No matter if it's Donald Trump, no matter if it's Hillary Clinton, this is the path you have chosen, he said. And yeah, so anyway, there's no shortage of teachings about that. But one point that I did find in my field research was that there was the sense of emotional and faith or confidence that, you know, I think Buddhist tradition stereotypically is kind of has a stereotype of a dry, rational, you know, intellectual thing and just meditating, navel gazing. And actually the role of faith and confidence is actually, was reported very highly in my research in the practices. So that even surprised me a little bit because we don't hear that so much for Buddhism.
Yes, I was wondering, is that ongoing research, Dr. Bhikshuni?
I'm applying for a grant right now to continue. Because of the earthquake, I couldn't get as many participants for statistics level, but really I was just trying to establish the qualitative constructs first. So, but I'm applying for a grant now, so.
It's very, very, very interesting. I was, you know, I love to see, I mean, some of the ways in which practices have been affected. And I was very interested that there were so many where there's not much difference.
Yeah.
You know, so because I think that we perhaps give far more, you know, we are far more conscious about something that is an everyday, you know, like you were saying, death is an everyday experience, you know, and some of these things are you know, and really we perhaps need to look more deeply at our everyday practices rather than, you know, look for some kind of esoteric practice out there, you know. So I found that very, very interesting. I mean, it connects also with what, you know, what Professor Negi and Dr. Chikako were also saying, you know, very much like maybe an intensification of our everyday practices is what this calls for. Finding that very interesting.
I have a question for Professor Negi. You talked about emotional hygiene, and to me it was so interesting last week in the Christian session, lamentation was such a big topic. Is it an aspect that is somehow relevant, or how would you frame lament?
How do you explain lamentation in Christian? It was that from the Christian perspective?
Like in the Christian session, it was such a big thing. Like I would say also for emotional hygiene, lamentation was so important.
Yeah, but the lamentation, how do you, what is lamentation?
Oh, maybe I need a native speaker. Grieving.
Remorse and grief.
Yeah. Sadness about things that have happened and wailing about it. Bewailing.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he talks a lot about emotional hygiene. You know, like he talks about how we have paid so much focus to physical hygiene, and it has improved, quality of life, in terms of many of these contagious diseases and like that. Today, we are quite mindful of our hygiene, physical hygiene and like that. But when it comes to emotional hygiene, that's right. If there are certain things that have gone wrong, or like as Dr. Ozawa-de Silva was mentioning, that we have this, negative bias, right? So let's say that, our parents have been 99%, they have done is wonderful things for us, but, that they have been a little tough, when we were teenagers, and then didn't quite, provided what we needed, and then we became upset with them, and then we hold to that negative part, or that maybe they are human beings like us, they have limitations as to how much they can do. They have certain, the weak moments, the difficult moments in time also. So that not everything that we expect they were able to provide us. But then, as a teenager, we may have just, that when our expectations are not met, we have reacted with like that they are mean and that they don't care for us, and we hold on to that, and that can be a very, very toxic, for our lives. So spiritual practitioners, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, or Buddhism, I think that all have recognized the importance of this letting go, like to forgiveness, or and that's what, when we talk about the emotional hygiene, like if we kept holding on to something, like whether it's obsessively the grasping, or something that is, we are reacting because of that it did not provide for what, or perceived kind of, harm or the negligence, and that can be very, very, toxic. That whole life we can kind of remain very much stuck in that resentment. And how do we go about, forgiving? And I think that like the modern psychologist is, is shedding some light on how our minds and emotions work. Buddhist tradition has been, working on this for millennia, and a very rich material, not just philosophical, level, but as a practice, theory brought into practice, that how do we go about forgiving? And like that, all spiritual traditions have that, like that. One of them is like, can we come to distinguish the actor from the action? Can we come to see, the person who has made some mistakes, or some caused some harms, or then fell short on some responsibilities and like that? Is that person just evil, or that person has a limitation, human limitation? In certain circumstances, that person can be. And so distinguishing the actor from action. We can always, see the problem in action. We can blame the action, but if we can, we can come to see a person, himself or herself, is not reduced to that one action, one negligence, one shortcoming. And that these are contemplative practices, as Dr. Ozawa-de Silva was mentioning this, reframing. It's kind of making visible, like that, about this human dimension, human condition of others. And so the reflective practice is what we call the analytical meditations. These are the insight, kind of the critical thinking process. We have this evolved brain that is capable of, processing information, from indirect evidence and like that. So through the reframing or the reshaping of our perspectives, we can, reshape our emotional responses, and then our behavioral kind of,
We're going to need to bring our small groups back again, but I want to interject as an IASC member, coming from a Christian perspective, but also very engaged with Judaism, that I have actually argued a lot in my writings over many years that forgiveness is not necessary. Because if it's an action of emotionally feeling like you need to be nice to that person and they have not repented, in Christian tradition, repentance precedes forgiveness in a lot of Jesus's teachings. And in psychoanalysis, to be in denial about your anger, it needs to be worked through to get to anger and lament before you can get to a point of what I would say in the Greek, in the New Testament, forgiveness is aphiemi, means releasing. And there I see a lot of correspondence with what you're talking about, that forgiveness isn't like an action that we take, but it's more a state that we're able to perhaps realize when we have gone through these emotional states and understood what's happened to us. So I don't want to try to smooth over what may be some real differences here, but I also think that there are things that from our various traditions, we can find some correspondences if we're not forcing people to prematurely say to someone, I forgive you, before they've done the internal processing that needs to take place. Does that make sense to you all?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Pamela, you're absolutely right. It's forgiveness is not something that can be forced.
Right.
Someone
And
to-
also,
I'm
yeah,
not just saying I forgive you, not like that. I think, let me give you just an example. It comes from a classic Buddhist text. It says that when a patient behaves violently or does something quite, horrible under the influence of illness, does the physician, hate the patient, or understands where the patient is coming from, and therefore help. It has to do with the attitudes, that what kind of emotion the physician has, whether the physician would hate the patient or kind of have understanding, concern, that forgiveness, it very much has to do with how the patient understands about where the physician understands where the patient is coming from. So it's a spiritual work. I mean, it has to be, it's not, but I would say that forgiving is not necessarily dependent on the, that one who needs to be forgiven, to repent or to, to seek, it is possible for Jesus to forgive those who were crucifying him, that even though they were not, repenting of their action, but he could say that, forgive Father, for the, they don't know what they are doing, or like that. I'm paraphrasing, but aware that what is compelling them to do this action. So it has very much to do with our
All I would say about that quote is that he asks God to forgive them. He doesn't forgive them.
Yeah, that may be that's something that the real difference, I think, that between the theistic, particularly monotheistic, traditions and the Buddhist tradition, because we don't have that concept of, that someone will forgive for your actions. You have to find a way to, overcome your own.
Welcoming our small groups back now. Thank you so much.
We
had our own little, very interesting small group conversation here. I'm going to turn it back over to Claudia for our final discussion.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we wait for another minute, I guess, for more people to come back.
I was trying to say that it would be great to be able to have a roundtable on a focused issue like truth and reconciliation, since most of the wars are carrying on under the guise of that, even if they're financial in motivation. But I'm thinking of, like Shoah in Tibetans, and the theologians and religious scholars seem to have forfeited their role a little bit in the discourse. So it's great to see as International Association of Spiritual Care coming forward.
That would be a wonderful topic. We actually did quite a lot of that at our conference in Israel, where we were in both Israel and Palestine, and one of our main speakers was very involved with truth and reconciliation in South Africa. So it's a topic that keeps recurring for us all. Okay, so everybody's here now from the small groups, and I'm going to invite you to share your questions or comments. I'm going to mute.
Yes, and you can bring them in. Any reflections are welcome at this point, or if you prefer, you can also put them in the chat and we try to bring them in. Yes, please, Aida.
Yeah, well, we have a nice conversation and we get into the subject about kindness. And like Nikan said, there's bases that practicing kindness and we get like the definition of kindness. So I will, is one of my questions. Well, we get into one as a team, but I want to hear about the kindness definition because we get into, is an emotion or is a state of mind or is a construct of wellness. So definition of kindness.
Thank you. Who wants to pick up this topic from the speakers?
Well, normally the tradition is originating in Theravada with like Satipatthana Sutra and 4 foundations of mindfulness and mindfulness of breathing. And so loving kindness, at least the way that tradition gets taught in Tibetan traditions, always get a differentiation from compassion and loving kindness, or love versus compassion. And the way I've been taught about it.
I thought there were small groups.
We're coming back from the small groups into the full
Right,
group.
but I thought the small groups were reporting back. There was supposed to be there's supposed to be one person reporting back representing each small group.
So you want to finish your answer, Bhikshuni, or your?
Well, I was just saying that you normally the way that there's a differentiation in terms of the wish for others to have happiness is the love and loving kindness side, and the wish for them to be free of suffering is the compassion side. So there's just a subtle tone variation there. But the metta practices of loving kindness, there you can find in Theravada. And access to insight.org has the full Theravada Buddhist scriptures in translation in English, so anyone can see those there.
Thank you.
For free download.
In our small group, we started our conversation appreciating the concept of Nikon that Chikako shared with us. The whole concept of interdependence brought me back to a dialogue I was having with other Benedictine Oblates early in the beginning of the pandemic lockdown. And I don't have the words that I had put in those musings, but it was the concept of the social isolation that has come through COVID brought me back to my own, and brought me back the experience of being in a hermitage where, I could practice solitude in the context of community. And the context of that is bringing all the people who have crossed my life into my prayer life and recalling the kindnesses and the relationships that I've had with them and praying for them in that context. And so not being isolated, even though I was in the practice of solitude. And I think the group just carried the discussion from there and related it back to where Nikon was coming from. And then one of our members in the group who's not here right now, I can't remember her name, had a question, but I'm not sure. She had a question about the third point.
It was me, Nancy. And to build on what Marisol is saying, I spoke more from a psychotherapeutic perspective that we internalize objects from a Western psychology perspective. And therefore, as our discussion in the group was that we were comparing that solitude is not necessarily isolation and so on. But my question was for Bhikshuni, at the end, your comment right at the end about the, we're never alone because of our gut or the nerve that runs from our mind to our gut. I was wondering if you were referring to the polyvagal theories or?
Well, yes, yeah, the data from that, but more specifically just to the concept of the internal ecosystem is not, it's more like a rainforest in there than a dead parking lot, like we traditionally were taught as kids a long time ago.
Thank you.
And we're healthier when those creatures are happier too, it seems.
We have something in the chat from Alejandra. Do you want to say something about it, about forgiveness and repentance? Maybe we come to the topic. Yes, please.
I'm sorry. I'm actually at the doctor's office. My dog had a seizure, so I cannot be fully present, but I didn't want to miss it, so that's why I just wrote the message.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the speakers who wants to bring in something about forgiveness and repentance? What Alejandra wrote?
Well, I wouldn't mind to follow up on one point that Geshe was mentioning a few minutes ago, which was, you know, even that in the message, he says, it seems to me that if we wait for others to repent so that we can forgive, we ourselves to be bound to resentment, which is an obstacle for happiness. And one of the doctrines in Buddhism of future lifetimes and past and future lifetimes, even if you don't want to take it in such a Newtonian way, even statistically, like a Native American tradition speaks of 7th generation. In that kind of point of view, the other and ourself, the differentiation there is can be seen as arbitrary from a cosmic perspective. So I agree with what that writer has said. And even though, I mean, what we know from the psychologists, when they tell us, you know, we have to be careful and mindful not to enable dysfunction and harmful activities, and mindful not to participate in that, which personally, I feel like our consent to war through our silence, this is a bigger problem for us right now. But if we hang on and we wait for the other person to come around to repent, it may never happen. And there, I think it was the Indian Vedic yogi Nisargadatta, I think it was said, you can't rip the skin from a snake. It has to be molted off in its own time. And who knows what are, you know, so what are the obstacles that blocks the other person from feeling remorse, feeling aware of their harm. But I think the communication cutoff, that is something we can take in from pastoral theology, and Christian tradition also has told us a lot about that, where being in communication cutoff, it won't happen at all if we don't engage. So it's tough. We have to practice patience also, and work with the other person or find others who can help, and at least hold them in our hearts and not close off internally, even if externally we can't seem to get together.
Can I say a word about this? There's no question that it becomes easier to forgive if the offender repents. You know, that's for sure that if you had you have been taken advantage of, the criticized or the done harm in whatever ways, if the other person really regrets and repents about that, it's easier to forgive the person. That hardly has to do with, like that when we relate to the other person as a human being, that who is susceptible, who is vulnerable, in some circumstances to make the mistakes, that when you can connect with others as a human, with all those vulnerabilities, but not reducing the person to as evil, that for that one action that he or she has done, to kind of reducing as pure, evil, then it becomes easier to forgive. We have to humanize, when other person, if we can humanize it, it's easier. And like that, it's through that process, but also further practices like the interdependence and so forth, seeing that what we have received and all those things, when we become aware, it leads to this sense of warm-heartedness, that endearing feeling towards others. When someone is endearing to us, it's much easier to forgive of their offenses, of their negativities. And then at the end, forgiving from the Buddhist perspective, it is not about, totally relying on someone else to repent. It's forgiving is like an emotional state of a forgiver, and that what gives rise to the forgiveness are multiple states. One of them, I think that you can see that at least kind of initial impetus to that if one can also see that how it affects yourself. Buddha had this beautiful metaphor when he said that holding on anger or the resentment is like holding a burning coal, in your hand. The tighter you hold, the more, it will inflict harm. It will burn you. That if the best thing is to let go, but it's not like they just, like the prematurely said that you need to forgive. It has to, arise, through this, by change in our perspective of other person, by building those kind of the human condition, humanizing, and then leading to that, seeing that other person is also susceptible, also separating the person and his or her actions. If we can do that, the forgiveness is possible, even when the other person is not repenting, but repentance certainly makes it easier to forgive.
Geshe, as you spoke so wonderfully and eloquently, just one point, because we have been already having quite extensive discussion on forgiveness. One thing I would like to add is actually forgiveness, what do we mean by that? Because I feel for many people, to forgive is almost like, okay, I forgive you. Let go, meaning I do not want to have any business with you. I parted. So I think that's also how the forgiveness is often thought. And there is a sense of being forced to forgive so that you can move on, but you don't have any warm, endearing feeling toward the person you're forgiving. I think that's what Geshe Lobsang is talking about. Even with this Naikan and its forgiveness, Kate said, well, not being able to forgive my mother was actually poison to herself because she has been drinking it over 20 years. She was not getting any better. That's why she ended up even trying a practice like Naikan. So ultimately, in at least the Naikan way coming from the Buddhist notion of forgiveness is, it's almost like now you're seeing warm feeling towards the person. So it's not that you just want to move on, but you want to even establish a relationship. My spouse, Brendan Ozawa-de Silva, is here as one of the participants, but he is quite expert on that aspect, which this Irishman, Richard Moore, got shot by the British soldier and being blinded, but he never actually had the hate towards the soldier, but instead he reached out and then wanted to establish the relationship. So his talk about forgiveness is very much in a line of, I would like to have relationship with the person. Yeah.
I can only say a little bit of what I've written a lot about this topic, but I feel that the word forgiveness still, perhaps when we're thinking about Buddhist tradition, has a bit of a Western or a Christian, it carries baggage that comes from a Western Christian perspective, that it's an activity that we have to do, and if we don't do it, we're bad. And from the Christian New Testament, the word is aphiemi in Greek, and it means to release. And I think there's a much greater parallel with what the Buddhist professors here are saying in terms of what it really happens in forgiveness. It's not an activity that you set out and you determine that you're going to do. Tomorrow I'm going to forgive this person, but that it's something that arises from internal work, and that it's not spiritual bypassing of that internal work. It's something that arises, and it almost feels like you're forgiven of that person, like a passive. It's not like you actively force yourself to do it. You create the conditions in which that releasing can happen. And that may or may not lead to wanting a relationship with that person. And of course, that person may not want anything to do with you, or may be dead. But there's an internal relatedness that, or compassion, I think, that's possible at that point, but you can't force yourself to do it. So I'm going to stop there, but I do think the word forgiveness has a lot of Western and Christian baggage to it, and perhaps finding ways of thinking about release is a better way of thinking about it.
Like and the word attachment, well, in psychology, attachment has negative connotation, but attachment in Buddhism is very different. So sometimes we have to, just be aware. One word does not mean what you assume what it means, right? I think that's a very important point, definitely. And to forgive, actually, one needs to gain the level of the autonomy back. So if you're feeling you are the victim, you cannot forgive somebody. So that's what you're talking about. You cannot force anybody to forgive. So it is a natural progress when one person no longer feels a victim. That's actually a starting point, right? Like the sense of empowerment. Anyway, I should stop too. Thank you.
Well, can I just jump in very briefly on the idea of it being a Western construct of forgiveness? I was just looking up in the Purbanet, and we see in Tibetan, what it got to Gongyang Nangwa, Zopa Sheba. So Zopa, the main connection in Tibetan Buddhism will be through this Zopa, perfection of patience. So we don't see it quite in the same role that you see in Christian terms, but the way, of course, in some ways, in the Vajrayana Tibetan tradition, it's more, I think it connects to Christian and Judaism traditions through the idea of a covenant. So when we have our vows and our precepts that we're going to cherish all living beings, even if it's an enemy, and who are we taking that precept with? That's the person, the Buddhas and the teachers, the Dharma tradition. And then if we can't keep that vow, then we are in arrears, right? Then we need forgiveness. So I think in Buddhist tradition, at least in my traditions, it's more, we're on the receiving end more than the idea of having to forgive the other person. We are the penitent role. Then we see it is in full glory in Tibetan Buddhism anyway.
Thank you very much for this lively conversation, and especially thank you very much our speakers, to Professor Negi, Professor Ozawa-de Silva, to Bhikshuni Trinley. Thank you so much, all the participants that you were in the discussion. This was the final session of our series of our webinar. You can listen to the webinars, to the past webinars on our website, and you will find the papers in our IASC publication, which we will announce in time. So night is falling in Estonia, as I can see the lights.
I didn't turn the light on before we started because it was daylight.
It's beautiful. So we see how much we are connected here over the globe. Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best for.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Claudia, thank you, and thanks to all the people who are visiting and online after the recording also. And may all living beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, and may they be free from suffering and have peace and harmony and just getting along and no stress.
Thank you.
Thank you.